Hey, I'm Mike Matzdorf.
And I'm Mike Yanovich.
And today we are going to be going through one of probably 6 episodes of Final Cut Unauthorized, which is us telling you how to use Final Cut in a professional situation.
These are not tutorials. We're doing broad strokes overviews. We're both pros in the industry. We make our living as editors. So we're aiming this at other professional editors. Again, not teaching you how to use it, but big picture strokes and trying to set standards on a good way to set up your libraries and your projects and everything you're working with. But we're not going to go into any nitty gritty. So if you know how to use it, this is great. And if you're an amateur learning about how this all works, please stay and join us.
We're going to get into the 3 major areas of Final Cut today. Well, actually, there's more than 3, but the big 3, the browser, the viewer, and the timeline. We're going to start with the browser. And the browser is in the upper left corner of your Final Cut screen.
It's not a web browser.
Not a web browser, but it's called the browser. And it's where you keep all of your media, your edits. You use it for ingesting media, you use it for organizing media.
In an old school system, if you're used to Avid or Premiere, these would be bins. This would be where everything is kind of organized and kept for you. These are kind of like bins on superpowers. These are bins from planet Krypton, come to Earth with our yellow sun, and the browser becomes a really highly powered, amazing tool.
And we're going to get into the superpowers in great granular detail in a later episode. Right now, as Mike said, broad strokes. So the browser contains libraries, which are akin to projects in Avid or Premiere. It contains events, which are akin to bins. And it also contains a couple other interesting things where, and I'm going to switch the screen right now, in the upper left corner here, if you notice, this is your library icon, and then this is a place to browse other media. For example, photos, songs, sound effects. Comes built in with a bunch of sound effects. You can add your own sound effects later. And the next tab over is for titles and generators. Final Cut has a super powerful titling setup and all sorts of generators and stuff that can be built in motion.
And if you hate the title tool in Avid, like all of us do, it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's kind of the overview of the browser. There's ways to filter, there's ways to ingest, playback, marking your selects, adding metadata, accessing the libraries, the titles, the generators. There's a ton of stuff that can be done in there, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. So let's move on to the viewer, which is on the right.
It's your movie you made.
That is. Ancient history.
The viewers review things. I mean, there's no big secret there, but you'll notice there's only one. In traditional edit systems, you're going to have a source and record monitor or 2 windows, one to see what you're working with and one to see what your edit is. Final Cut is actually designed to work on a single screen, a single computer monitor. You can have multiple. You can have a built-in, a permanent client monitor, and you can work with 2 screens, and there's your source and record view now, but it's meant to work in one to free up real estate, screen real estate. And it works really well with a single monitor. And if you're looking at source footage, the single monitor will show you source footage. And if you move over to the timeline, the viewer area will show you what's in the timeline. And it works great.
Yeah, a few extra. The viewer does a little bit more than that. You might notice some things around the edges. For example, it tells you what the resolution of the footage is that you're working on, whether it's stereo or surround, the name of your cut. You can change the magnification on things. You can get into looking at multicam angles. It switched to proxy media literally with the flip of a switch. A whole bunch of stuff that, again, we're going to get into at a later date. That's the same place you find your title safe, your action safe, horizon lines, captions on and off. On the bottom edge of the viewer, there's some amazing tools. This right here, one of my favorite things, this is a transform tool, and there's a couple other things just for making quick edits to how things appear, whether it's blowing something up, rotating something, cropping something, distorting something, and it's all keyframeable, which is awesome. A bunch of sort of automatic helpers here with color and audio, and a very, very flexible speed change retime tool that we're going to get into in great detail later.
And you want to bring up, we're not going to go into a lot of detail on this with the inspector real quick, but if you hit Command 4, it'll pop up. There it is. The inspector is part of the viewer. That's the audio tab. There's a metadata information tab. There's a color tab in there. And when you don't need it, you just get it out of the way.
The other thing are these tiny little audio meters here. One good thing about them, if you click them, they come up.
I didn't know that. I've always gone to the tool menu to bring that up. That's a nice shortcut.
There you go. Free information, on and off. And if you're playing in a surround project, you're going to see, it does 5.1, so you're going to see six different meters playing through there. I tend to keep it open like that. Let's move on, since we started with the meters in the timeline, move on to the timeline. The timeline it's a timeline. It's a different timeline than the rest of the world because it's magnetic.
It's a timeline that's come from the planet Krypton and crash landed on Earth with our yellow sun.
Somebody's got a Superman problem.
They have. Right?
So, you do your edits, you do your audio overlaps, J&L cuts, you can add sound effects, you can add music, you can get into pretty granular audio editing if you move in on something really close. For example, like right here, this is a frame, this area, and you can get into keyframing and super granular detail there.
You can do subframe audio editing.
Subframe audio editing.
I want to bring something up about the timeline because people watching it the tracks are not obvious, and this is the part, again, we're not going to go in extreme detail right now. This is what's going to mess up editors who've never used this. Mike already mentioned it's a magnetic timeline that is going to throw you off, and it's going to take getting used to. And the other thing is there's no tracks. There are no tracks on there. There's one kind of main track, and everything else kind of floats and is attached to it.
It hangs off the track. Yeah, that's right. They're called connected clips, whether they be below or above what's considered the main timeline. We're going to get into that in just a second because we're moving on from the timeline. Anybody who's an editor knows how to use a timeline, tries to keep their stuff organized. Let's move into the middle toolbar that you can see here. It starts with the word index over here, and there's a few tools here. And let's just kind of go through this real quickly because it's simple but super powerful.
Yes.
So the timeline index is a feature that a couple other editing systems have adopted. And what it is a list. It starts with a list of your clips that are in your timeline. And if you click on something, it's going to jump to it. And you can filter. So if you're looking just for the stuff that is 90A, it's just going to show you the stuff that's 90A, and you can go jump through that. If you're looking for just the stuff that's music, you could do that. I mean, let's type it in there. Okay, so there's the track for music.
There's only one track now, but if there were 10, it would show you all 10 of them.
It would, and you could jump between them, and you can use these tools down here to filter this. Now, this panel has a few other things going on. You can also leave notes on things, for example. And let's go into the tag section to demonstrate that. So we've got a marker right here, which is this blue marker over here. And I could click on that marker and add a note, or I could add a note over here in this area. So timeline index is super powerful. Now, Mike was saying no tracks. Here's the kicker. In this panel, you also see rolls. Final Cut, rather than putting something on a track, like saying, as far as let's talk about audio. So dialogue's on 1 through 4, the effects are on 5 through 8, music is on 9 through 12, and then put some stereo tracks below that if you're in the Avid, in case you're mixing mono and stereo tracks, and you have this gigantic timeline full of stuff.
Except all of a sudden the producers show up and they have stuff to add. They want more audio, they want some more sound effects, and you got to open up this space and move, copy all your tracks, move them down and make more space. It's a lot of work, and every time you select a new clip that you want to put in the timeline, you got to tell it what track it's going to. All that's gone. So, it's a thing of the past.
Krypton. So how this works in very general terms is you call something what it is ahead of time. It's part of the prep. A lot of the stuff, when it comes in, it already knows what it is. Like if you have a video clip with embedded audio, it's going to know that it's video and dialogue. It's going to call it that. If you have sound effects that you take from your sound effects library, it's going to know that they're sound effects. And if you take music from iTunes, it's going to know that it's music. You can change these designations by clicking on one of these and saying assign audio roles. We'll call it something else. You can change the colors of the roles. And also, if let's say you're just working on effects, you can minimize everything else. It stays right in sync there. And just work on the effects. You know, in a real timeline, there's going to be dozens, tens, hundreds of effects in it, and it really helps to be able to work that. Or if you have so much going on and you just want to push it up to the top, you can just grab it and push it up to the top, and now your effects are on top of everything else, so you can spend some time working on them.
And I want to add something real quick.
Yes.
We take this for granted. That effect track could be mono, stereo, 5.1. It could be anything. It only is going to take up one line in your actual timeline, right. But it works with any kind of audio tracks in there, however you have them set up, and they just take up as little physical space as possible, and you don't have to worry about keeping 5 tracks in sync or stereo tracks in sync. It is all there in that container.
Right, and if you do feel the need for a little bit of separation, you can do this thing called audio lanes. So watch what's going to happen here when I pre-lap this audio a little bit. Okay, things just jump down. It made room for it, which is super handy. And if I duplicate, I'm just going to duplicate this this track right here, this sound effects track, and stuff just got out of the way. So this is just a restaurant BG for this scene that's taking place in a restaurant, and things just get out of the way. And if I want to trim something up or put a
they don't run into each other because they're on the same track.
Exactly. So this is the area where you can work really fast, be really organized, and deliver very specifically to sound broken out in roles. And again, huge conversation. We're going to get into that a little bit more later.
But the warning is, track-based editors, this is going to be your biggest point of contention. You're going to have issues learning how to work this. It's going to take you 2 weeks. This is the hardest part to learn. When you learn it, you'll never want to go back to the old way of working.
Right, right.
Give it some time. This is where you're going to have your problems between the note and the magnetic timeline.
Yes, and this is something that Mike can speak to directly as an old-time avid guy who
will speak directly.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on from that area right now and just move across the middle bar here. So we're talking just basic editing tools. Final Cut works on the principle of connecting clips to the primary storyline. So I don't know if you can see this here, but there's a little bit of a darker gray. That's the primary storyline. So if I wanted to come up here and add something to the top of it, let me just drag over this, and I'm just going to click this button. Also, the Q
part is the select, your in and out section.
Yeah, or the Q key, and I'm going to click that, and it puts it on top. Now, because we have these audio lanes expanded, okay, so now this is picture and sound. So if you want to drag this, you can see that little string connector that's holding it to it. Wherever that's connected to, it's going to stay. So if you picked this clip up and moved it, it would take that with it. Super handy, super powerful. So that is what's called a connected clip. You connect that. Let's get rid of that. And some more common stuff over here. Inserts into the timeline. Append, which adds things at the end. I love this. It's the E key, and it just puts stuff at the end of the timeline. No matter where you're parked, no matter what you've got going on, it just sticks it at the end of the timeline.
You're going through footage and want to pull a bunch of selects and don't want to, write over anything by mistake. You just hit the append key, keeps going to the end.
Exactly.
And then the buttons, there's shortcut keys for all of this, but
there's a million shortcut keys.
Yeah, you're going to learn it by pushing the buttons first, and then you'll get the shortcut keys later.
Exactly. And this one is your common overwrite. So no sync change, and it overwrites whatever's in the primary storyline there. So you might notice this little arrow here. And again, there's keystrokes for this that you become accustomed to. So this gives you the options of everything, whatever's in these clips, if there's picture and sound married, or picture only, or audio only. So if you wanted to just do audio only, knowing that this is dialogue, and you hit the Q to connect it, it's going to put the audio right there, married to this particular piece that will travel with it if you move it around.
You won't think ever again. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, you can, but it's a lot harder.
You got to work at it.
Yeah, yeah. And you can also change where those clips are connected, FYI. You might have noticed here, the music also came with it because it's connected to that point as well. If you wanted the music to remain in sync over here, just click Option Command where you want it to remain in sync with, and the connection moves to that point. So just quick editing lesson there. Now let's move over here. Whoever used Final Cut 7 is familiar with the toolbar. Mostly the same, but a little different here. So these are your common tools. You will get accustomed with these keystrokes. They're super powerful, and they do a lot of different things, which we're going to get into in great detail a little later, especially the trimming. Here is the name of this sequence, which is also appears up here. Now Final Cut calls sequences projects. I'm having a real hard time shrugging the sequence, which is what I always say.
Yeah, that's again another thing for people from other systems. I don't know why they did it. They call it events instead of bins. It's fine. They call it a library instead of a project. That's fine. But they call it a project instead of a sequence. So I've really gotten into the habit when I'm speaking to people in any other editing situation. If I'm speaking to an assistant editor or a DIT or a producer or a house I'm delivering footage to, I call it a sequence. Final Cut calls it a project. Be ready to tear your hair out. I'm way ahead of you.
Look at that. Amazing. It's gone.
It's a great system.
So next to the name of the sequence is, you might notice a yellow and a white set of numbers here. Now, I use this all the time. The yellow is whatever is either selected or between an in and an out point. So this happens to be 4 seconds and 12 frames for that. The overall length of the sequence is a minute, 2 seconds, and 13 frames. So just a little help there. Over here, some good tools. This is, right now you might notice I'm moving my mouse and nothing is happening. So Final Cut has something called skimming. So if I'm moving my mouse, now the the footage is moving in the timeline. It's moving here. Very handy if you're just trying to breeze through something and find a moment. Audio can be turned on or off with that. I tend to turn it off because it's annoying. Mm-hmm. Solo, snapping. These are some timeline settings, which is just kind of
at the beginning of or end of a clip. It's not.
Yeah, snapping. It's not snapping. This is just some ways to adjust your timeline with zooming in and out, choosing a different layout, a ratio of how the picture looks versus the sound, making something taller or shorter, being able to add different names, different things to the clip here. Like you might notice up here, it says video, channel 1, channel 2. Those are the roles that are inside that clip. You can turn that off if you don't want to see it. You can add it if you had multicam footage, which I believe we do have some multicam stuff down here. Let's just throw a little bit of that at the end by hitting the E key. So I can also show angle names. So right now, this is the A camera. It's all information that you'll be very familiar with in your particular project.
And by the way, if you're shooting with multiple microphones and you get IXML data from your audio recordist, it will show their individual mic names there. So it will say character name, would say Sheriff Lavalier. It would say boom mic. It would say Deputy Lavalier. So you would have all that information there on the clip if you want it. Very handy. So,
and we're going to get into that in granular detail.
We will. Broad strokes.
I know, broad strokes. And so lastly, in the end here, there is a couple more browsers. Remember the browsers from up here that had music and generators. There's a couple over here. Now these are effects for picture or sound. A lot of pre-built stuff, a lot of cool looks, a lot of interesting things. Interesting thing about some of these is that if you mouse over them, let me just be sure I'm over something here. It's going to load it and give you a preview of what it looks like, which is super handy. So you can see what something might look like in advance of having to apply it, adjust it, render it, play it. So I know that I don't want that look. A lot of effects here come from Logic, so some super powerful audio things. And you can add, there's a lot of third-party stuff you can add to this. I use this fantastic noise-reducing plugin from the Cleve Grant company. And next to that is transitions. So dissolves, wipes, all sorts of stuff. It's a lot of, depending on what you're working on, you probably won't use a lot of that stuff, but there's some very solid, dissolves and wipes and other stuff like that in there. So
of course, you can make your own presets and put them in whenever you want.
Yes, and any of this stuff can be sent to Motion and tweaked if you're hip to how to use Motion. Yep. I still have to learn Motion. Great, so that's the middle toolbar, super powerful. And the last thing that we're going to look at in this little guided tour is the top toolbar. Let's get into that. There's some powerful tools here. A lot of them are for assisting. There's a couple things up there, but most of them are aimed towards assistance. So up here, this is your import window, which is going to allow you to import from drives, cameras, even the camera on your iMac, laptop, whatever, if you need to record something in just for temp. This is a keyword editor, powerful tool. So the keyword, we're going to get into keywords in granular detail, but keywords are just tags that you apply to footage. And the cool thing about this is you can apply them to a shot, but you can also apply them to a frame or a range of frames. So if you go through and you find something fantastic, like this is the best part of this shot right here, the dolly move is amazing, I can just add the keyword, Mike likes this or whatever, and it's then going to be attached to that particular range of frames down here. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. So those are my frames. So I can then search for stuff with my name on it if I laid it out. But keywords
powerful for everything. For documentaries in specific, it is unbelievable. It is an incredibly powerful tool for documentaries.
Yeah. So if you have a couple of people working, people can mark their own favorites, selects. Things that are important, great, good moments for the character, good moments for a trailer, stuff to send to marketing. You know how if you're working on Avid, you have a bin for marketing that you've been collecting the entire time, little bits and pieces that you might want to send out somewhere. This keywording allows that on the fly, and it'll save the first 9 presets, which you can call up by keystrokes, or you can just add stuff, and they're going to show up in your list
and I used
over
it
here.
For to keep it brief, though. I used it for a pyramid documentary about pyramids in Giza, and I can't tell them apart. They're 3 pyramids to me, but you'd have a drone shot over all 3, and I'd be able to select the range saying this pyramid is this name, this is Khufu, this is Khafre, this is Menkaure, and I'd also have the keyword drone. So drone would apply to the whole shot, and the actual individual pyramid names were over just the parts where they appeared on screen. So really amazing tool.
Next down the line is a background tasks window. If anything's going on with your system, it's going to tell you. This is going to tell you rendering, importing, media management, all that stuff, even saving. It just usually goes on and off, but it's just to keep track of what's going on. Third-party plugins are made. They're called extensions for Final Cut. I have Frame.io plugin and the Simon Says plugin installed here. I have something to do with Simon Says. And there are a few others that are being made. I suppose we could link to a complete list of what's available.
Yeah, and this is a new feature recently added to Final Cut. There's only a handful of extensions so far.
Right.
I've used Frame.io extensively with this, and I've used Simon Says a bit as well.
Right. Now, although you're only seeing one monitor here, this next button is for if you have a dual monitor setup. I'm going to turn that on, and let's just see what our settings are right now. So right now, I have it set to have the browser and the timeline on monitor number 1. I can configure this a few different ways. And on the other monitor is the browser with a big list of information, takes, and all that stuff that we've been looking at. So let's go back to single monitor view. If you're only plugged into a single monitor, this button will not be here. These next two, couple just quick tools. You can show and hide the browser. If you don't need it, you're in the middle of a scene, you don't want to be disturbed by all that text, just turn it off. Conversely, if you're just doing some list work, you can turn off the timeline and not be bothered with it. And we're going to skip this one and come back to it in a second. This last one is called the sharing button, and this is for exporting. You can have a list of presets here for exporting. You can add customized export destinations. You can grab settings that are from compressor. Lots of good stuff here. Infinitely customizable. And the last button that we skipped over there is called the inspector. The inspector is basically information about whatever you are clicked on. It's where you can control like a blow up, for example, of the shot. Let's see where we clicked. You can control a blow up, a reposition. Oh, that's handsome.
Scale.
Scale, thank you, yes. Position, you move things around. A whole bunch of, all your effects will appear here if you took an effect and dropped it onto this shot. Let's just scroll over. I'm gonna make it 50s TV. It's gonna double click on there, load it up. So now it's gonna have the controls for that particular effect in there. You can also disable effects by just clicking on them. Things you can add stabilization, things to fix how the picture looks. And you can also save things. So if you have a look that you've applied to something, you can save it as its own thing. It will appear in the effects browser here as a custom item. You can also, if you're dealing with color, let's
Lot of color.
A lot of color tool. We got some color wheels, we got some curves, we got some more curves, masks, all kinds of stuff. It's super powerful that way. Any information about the sound that you have here. Now, you might notice like, okay, we have picture with sound. This is a synced clip, so the camera sound is turned off. The sound that we sunk to it is turned on. As Mike said earlier, these could have microphone names. This is kind of an old project, so not all the advancement, but we could have Tony and Katie in here for them wearing their individual mics, or Lav and Boom, whatever. And again, audio effects will appear here. This window can be minimized a little bit if you're looking to have more timeline real estate by clicking on it. So the inspector holds a ton of good information about anything, including all of your metadata, camera information, sample information, you name it, and there's a million things that you can add to this. So with the inspector, I think we can wrap it up for this session, Mike. Thank you very much.
So.
And we're going to come back with another episode and focus exclusively on the browser and everything that it can do. So we'll see you then.
Yeah, come on back. We'll show you a bunch of details.
All right. Take care.
See ya.